Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim. I'm CFO of a company called Stylabs, and I'm going to talk to you today about Marketing Content Hub, which is basically the short spoken version of the book that you all got in the bag, if everything went well. I hope Jason already took you out of the afternoon nip. He probably did. So let's get started. The Marketing Content Hub basically started from our experience in marketing technologies world, where we'd frequently have a situation where an RFP came in and on the front cover it says DAM. All kinds of flavors, but basically it says DAM, and you start reading it. And there is probably some typical DAM stuff in there, but there's also other things. There's integrations, there is data that is not metadata, but proper data. There is maybe product information, there is all kinds of connections that need to be made. And so we often had to deliver a proposal that had a minor piece of DAM in there, but was basically something else. So we decided to come up with a more conceptualized version of that story that was previously ad hoc. So my first question is it really a DAM you need? And let's start by exploring that. A typical DAM business case is that your organization needs a means to store media files. And if I put it on the screen like this, that seems pretty thin as a business case, right? So it is important, but it's still thin. So let's see what else we could do there. If we start digging into that, a typical DAM use case scenario is more or less what you see here. There's uploading and reviewing files, there's storing files and some metadata so that you can find them back. There is managing the life cycle if you're lucky, there's searching for them, there's transformation, and there's distribution. And again, that is basically about it. What we're missing here is a number of other use cases or requirements that we see popping up. And depending on the line of business you're in, it can be different things with a different focus or priority. But these are all things that pop up in most clients sooner or later. And some of them can be allocated to different software categories, like you could say that commenting and annotation and validation of work in progress is a category in its own. But then again, it's very close to that. Why would you actually separate those two out? Creative project management and collaboration, but also publishing challenges, translation, localization, and so on and so on. So the idea we have is that we want to pitch a marketing content as something that can be complementary to DAM and those other systems, or it can be a way to organize those systems in a certain logic. And this is what it looks like. On the left-hand side, there's a number of systems or processes or third parties that own bits and pieces of content. And I'm always talking with the head of a marketeer, a product manager. Those systems own bits and pieces of, let's say, marketing content or product content that you're interested in. On the right-hand side, there's a number of publication channels where you ultimately need that information to go. And what we propose is to take a standpoint in the middle, because we think that is the place where your typical marketer or product manager is actually standing, and build something there. Build a 360 view on all of the marketing content. That is the basic goal of this marketing content. And in order to do that, we need to do a couple of things. We need to have a repository, which is the foundation. Cannot do without a repository, and that is the central black dot. We need to have a way to facilitate and to support the processes that are happening around that content. Content creation processes, content reuse, content localization, etc. And that is the first outer layer, so creative project management and collaboration tools. And then finally, the second outer layer there is a marketing and brand portal. the central part is rather structured content. It's almost like a database, very much like a DAM. But there's also more editorial content and context that we need to complement it. So if we start looking into a little bit more detail, we could say that these are 3 core use cases that we want to cover on top of the traditional DAM use case. Building that 360 view on all of your marketing content is basically expanding the scope of the content you manage. It's not just media files. It is also non-file-based content, like a proper product description that has been copyrighted, that has been translated, that has been reviewed by legal, that has passed R&D for confirmation of the technical specs. That snippet of text is as valuable as a picture from a photo shoot. But it isn't a file, it's also not metadata, it is proper data. So bringing that content together in a 360 view, then empowering your marketing people with project management and collaboration tools, that's an important one to deal with those processes. Setting up a dialogue with your marketing community. Everybody working on your brand, working on that information, it is a community. People are touching that marketing content hub, some of them on a daily basis. So it's worthwhile starting a dialogue with them. And then the 4th one, facilitate omni-channel. Facilitate omni-channel publishing for content marketing, which is, for most of our clients, basically the end goal of this effort. So, building that 360 view. How do we do it? Again, on this slide, the important part is we want to, first of all, aggregate content that is coming from here. Not everything. As a marketer, I'm not interested in everything that is sitting in the ERP. But there are bits and pieces there that are very important. Like a typical case would be that if you're a product company, the master structure of how you organize your products and which product is available in which country, in which version, that is information that is traditionally living in ERP as a master data system. So we should get to that. So aggregating stuff, but also creating new stuff here. One of the main challenges there is that in a traditional setup, you usually align on what the software vendor talks about. And this could be a typical meeting of a DAM software vendor. And this is basically the universe that they live in. This is almost database language. This is how you build a DAM. On the other hand, your marketeers will probably have a conversation that is much more like this. And if I tell you that I want your marketeers to learn the other lingo and start having their conversation in database language, you probably feel it coming that this will not be a very successful project from a user adoption point of view. So instead of following the traditional industry categories where a box that says DAM has assets and layouts as entities, a PIM, product information management system, has maybe product family and product and SKU, and ERP has your business units and your customers and so on. We like to turn that around, and we like to draw up the diagram that represents the way that your marketeers and product managers think. And this is a diagram we drew up for a food retailer, a more upscale food retailer. And they have the conventional stuff, like this is their SKU product, and this is the product image, and they have a bunch of sales materials that are organized in campaigns, etc., etc. But because they are more of an upscale food retailer, they need to have a story around those products, because they are not the cheapest, they are the best, and they need to convince people about that. And so all of this, like generic ingredients, the story about olive oil. There's olive oil coming from different regions in the world with specific qualities to it. That is a story that you want to tell in your magazine, on your website, etc. You need recipes. Recipes are edited by chefs. They can sit in collections like Christmas recipes, etc., etc. So all of this is the way that they would like to organize their marketing universe. So this is the starting point. Not this. That is a very important piece. And what this is in technical language is actually a domain model. It's a representation of how you organize content and how content links together. So in case of this food retailer, what does that look like if you start implementing it? It looks like this. This looks very much like a DAM would look. But if you look carefully, you can see that the search results here are not assets. Like these search results are ingredients. But the search results could also be chefs, or they could be assets, or publications, or campaigns, or any of these entities that you saw in the diagram. So you can basically go in and look for things, very much like you would look for assets in a DAM. Except that here you can change asset for any of those entities. I can go into the platform and see what campaigns are running that are related to this country and to this section of my product range. And then I can eventually end up on an asset, but I don't have to. So this, for example, it looks very much like a detail page for an asset, but it isn't. It's a detail page for an ingredient, chives in this case. And there is an asset link to this. And this is a detail page for a chef. Again, there are assets linked to that, but there's also recipes that the chef has provided to the platform. So the first thing, 360 view on marketing content, not just media files, marketing content, more holistic. The second thing, processes on content creation, content reuse, content localization, content publishing, etc. There's a lot of tools out there, and I think that you all know typical collaboration tools that are about annotation, reviewing, validation, etc. You probably also know what they call workflow tools, where they start by defining the process and then putting that into a kind of swim lane flowchart. And then you start implementing that in software, and 6 months later you throw it away because marketing people don't like to be in swim lanes. We've learned the hard way that the most sensible approach to dealing with these processes is probably start from project management. And so these are all typical processes that are happening around content. And if you think project management, you should actually think about a knowledgeable project manager in your company who knows how to navigate between people, between different skill sets, between different sets of information, etc. And fulfill the job, bring it to good end. And what we want to do is we want to provide the tools to facilitate that, to support that, to support both the project manager, but also to support the people that are collaborating. It's much more something like this. It's organizing stuff and putting very simple milestones on it and sending tasks and providing overviews of that, than it is BPMS-driven workflow, than it is swim lanes. And then the collaboration piece, that is almost a traditional category that you probably know how it works. But we think that's important to mention that mobile is getting a lot more important there. We often hear very specific stories about the profile of people that need to validate things, that they are the bottleneck in the process. And we also found out that mobile, tablet, whatever you want to call it, is a very powerful tool to shorten that bottleneck. So the 360 view, the processes. Thirdly, setting up a dialogue with your marketing community. Oftentimes, DAM is complemented with brand portals. And basically, a brand portal is a place where you copy-paste the brand guidelines into a web format. That's good, but it's not spectacular. But it is also that kind of CMS-like functionality. So building a website with pages in a sitemap, that is the core tool that you have. And we think that you can do two important things with that. First, complement your structured data that is sitting in your core with more editorial data. Things that are more about explaining something. And the appropriate format for that is having pages, but very close to assets, because if you talk about a campaign, you want to explain the campaign, but you also want to show the assets for that campaign or other information that you store in your structured part of the marketing content close to that content. So they need to be very close together. A second aspect is that you need to make this not an application, you need to make this a portal site. It should be a place where people can come to find information. And information is not limited to downloading something, it is also a place where you can do peer reviews. You can show outstanding examples of a localization project. You can show what other marketeers in global marketing firms are doing with the same content, etc. So it should look more like this. And then lastly, and this is almost solved by doing all of the other stuff, we should facilitate omni-channel publishing. And we take a relatively humble stance there, in the sense that we're in the back office, but we have beautiful consolidated information. We have a single version of the truth with everything in one system. And so what we do is we facilitate these channels. We have, from a technology point of view, we have connectors, we have APIs, we have a can-do architecture, we like to call that, in order to facilitate all of those channels. Because it's a lot of channels. Not every channel has the same technical options, so it's important that your central hub should be the one that has multiple ways to plug into. And also provide some of the transformation, the delivery options, etc. That's a piece of infrastructure, it's more a technology thing. This is really a business case that we're trying to build here, so we should talk about value as well. Usually, the first approach to value, you can do a lot of stories around it, but mostly we focus on marketing operations, and return on investment we get there is relatively simple. You can do something about the quality, you can do something about the cost, and you can do something about the speed. And these are all convincing elements at the level of balancing the investments with what you're going to gain with that over maybe a 3-year period or a 1-year period or whatever. So this is interesting, and this is probably what you need to write a business case that gets approved on a dollar value. What is more interesting is if you can detect strategic benefits that go beyond shaving off 30% of the cost in this or this department. If you can, to put it bluntly, change the perception and change the reality that marketing operations is no longer part of the problem, but is actually part of the solution. If you, for example, can make it predictable that your marketing operations can roll out a new product in a certain market at a controlled quality, controlled cost, in a controlled timeline, and you can actually show that you have the tools in place and the process in place to do that, then that could be one of the decision points for your leadership to decide if they're going to do it or not. That's an important tool. That is important. All of a sudden, marketing operations is part of the solution. So, this was the short version of the book. I hope you still read the book, because it has much more. It goes into more detail, and it also has a couple of more technical or in-depth chapters in it where we actually explain the challenges in realizing this. I'm happy to take questions now. Nobody? Just need a dam.
You mentioned that marketing folks being probably more creative don't like to be put on swim lanes. So opening up the dialogue, what are some of your suggestions to how to work effectively with the marketing teams? And not the challenge of a project manager sometimes is to have structure, but at the same time be very open to working in creative ways.
Yeah. I think that the first thing is that creativity and being organized and streamlined are not opposites. I think that the more streamlined and organized you are, the more room in time, in money there is for creativity to actually do stuff that you want to do and take away some of the workload that is coming out of very practical, mundane stuff. So that's a first message. The second message is we have some things to fix from the past, because yes, as a company, we have imposed IT tactics on new marketing folks, and they were not always appropriate, and they went past some of the complexities that marketing operations has. We oversimplify things. What typically happens is there's a business analyst that goes sit with the marketing people, and that person treats the marketing process as if it were a factory. And he draws up the swim lanes. And then, if you're lucky, he'll draw more than the happy flow. He'll draw the exceptions as well. And then they start putting that into stone. If you're lucky, the exceptions are there as a complication. And then the first time you use that, things have changed, because there is a different process, there is a different angle to this. All of a sudden it needs to go past legal, and that was not part of the analysis. And then the machine gets stuck, as simple as that. Another thing could be that you implement this with a very IT mindset, and it's more or less a database guy who is developing this. And so from an end user perspective, it's not a good experience. It seems like a burden rather than something that helps. The way we look at it is, if we build a platform like this, every business task that you complete is like a conversion. It's almost like an e-commerce logic. If we can convince somebody to do the task on this platform, and we can make them do the full journey and actually complete the task, that's a conversion. There is some value for the company in that. We have saved something. We have saved maybe time, and that is the mindset. And so the people that are using this in their private life, they use applications that need to focus on conversion. They need to treat them as a customer. And so that is another attitude we take. We want to treat them as an end user that can be picky, an end user that has the right to user-friendly interface.
Just can tell you that you are absolutely right. We are using a big editorial system for the BMW sales literature, and it's a very powerful tool. Every market is able to make approvals, give comments, and so on. So very, very complex. The end is no one uses it. Why? They look up on this tool 2 times a year, and the new catalog is coming, and no one knows how it works. The people has changed, and so on and so on. So you have to make it much more simple. Yeah, that it must be so simple that if you have the experiences of another tool and you come to this tool, then it must work. And this is the idea behind that.
Yeah, actually, people often ask me about training schedules, etc. And what I usually tell them is it's okay to have admin trainings, but if you need actual trainings for end users, there's probably something wrong with the design. You can have trainings that are actually roadshows to evangelize. That is okay. But actual training sessions, that shouldn't be. Any more questions? Come on, don't be shy.
With project managers, I've seen quite often with creative groups, project managers are usually not welcome in the conversations around creatives. Whereas I've seen a shift towards resource managers, where resource managers tend to be more of the family, right? You see a shift of how creatives view project management, kind of with the capital P, and project management with the lowercase p.
Yeah. I think that it could be okay for a sub-job within a larger project for a creative studio to be self-managing. And what they will do is they will not call one of their peers a project manager, but somebody is managing that piece of the project. Overall, if you're talking project or program level, somebody needs to manage it. And again, it's probably perception. The project manager is always the bad cop in this. But in the end, you need somebody that can report, that can take responsibility, that can actually interact if something is going out of line. The best way is probably to facilitate as much as possible and make it a friendly thing, rather than imposing stuff. But yeah, I'm not going to say that this will make project managers creatives best friends, but it will help balance out some of the historical tensions here. Any more questions? No? All right, thank you. Please do read if you want to touch base with us. You can find us at the booth. You can always reach out through other media, of course. We'd be happy to speak to you. Thank you.